my May wrap up, but I don't know, time just flies. I don't even know how we're already almost halfway through the year, and we're here now to talk about the 12 books that I read in May, and I think May was like my best reading month ever. I didn't just have one 5-star or even two, I had several. There were also books though that I disliked with a passion. And one book even put me kind of in a slump. But before I go into the books, I thought I would talk about a bit of the statistic. I already said that I read 12 books and I physically read 11 of them and listened to one audiobook. And to put that into page numbers, I read 3,690 pages, and I didn't count the audiobook because also I don't have it physically with me. Then my average rating for this month is 3.9, and I feel like that sounds so low, although I had such a good reading month. But also, as I already said, there are a few dots in here that really brought the rating down. In terms of genre, I read 5 romances and 6 fantasies and 1 like sci-fi romance. So overall, kind of shocked that I read more fantasy than contemporary romances, since I only started reading fantasy last year, and before that I thought I would never read fantasy, but always open to change. And I also really worked on my series this month. I read 10 books that were part of a series and only 2 that were true standalone. So that being said, let's jump to the first book that I read this month. And I feel like that my first book feels like such a long time ago, but I actually shared my thoughts on that particular book in a video that's also been out for a while, because that was my new releases for April, I think. And I read this on the first day of May, and that is Powerful. And oh my goodness, if you saw that video, you know my thoughts about this. You saw me crying for this book in that video. I gave this 5 stars. This is the second part, the novella in the Powerless universe, and it takes place at the same time as the first book, Powerless. And we're gonna get Reckless next month, and oh my goodness, I can't wait to read more of this world. Oh my god. Lauren Roberts writes so well. And I mean, this is a novella and I hardly ever tap my books, but I started tapping this because this was just so good. And just the things these characters say to each other, I loved it. If you want to see more of my thoughts, I'll link the video of my reading vlog reading this below. But yeah, this was a great start to May. And it didn't stop there. After that, I read finally Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I heard great things about this book. And the thing is, when you hear great things about a book and almost everyone seems to love it, that your expectations are very, very high. And the book can be good or even great, but because your expectations are so high, you can still be let down. And I was very scared that this book would do that to me, but it did not disappoint. So in this book, you follow Iris and Roman, and they both compete for the same job to get a column on this newspaper. In this place, I think in like the early 1920s or something like that. I mean, it's not our world, it's fantasy, but this is not in like modern time. And there's also a war going on, but on the other side of the country, so it's not close enough to them. But Iris' brother is in the war and she wants to find him, and she also writes letters to him on this typewriter, but it turns out that those letters are never received by her brother, but actually Roman, her rival. And yeah, you have a little bit of a star-crossed lover going on in here, and the magic typewriters that are connected, so they receive each other's letters. And this book is just deeply romantic, I think. Like, when you love books and writing, you will probably enjoy this book. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it, and I am so excited to get into the second one. Why this wasn't a 5-star to me personally is I think this was just a little bit almost too soft for me, and I don't really know how to describe that. But on the one hand, this was very romantic, but it wasn't very emotional to me personally. Like, it felt a little bit naive almost, their romance. This is also YA, so the characters are quite young, and because this plays in like the olden age where relationships progress differently, let's say that, where, you know, you need to be married, for example, to do further stuff. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was just not really my type of romance. But the whole story and the characters and the events of the war, like, it was all very, very good. And then after that, I don't know what happened. I mean, I talk about this quite a lot, that I'm a mood reader, and sometimes my mood leads me to weird books. Not weird in particular, but just books that really weren't on my radar and I didn't think I would read. And then all of a sudden my mood decides like, oh no, you want to read that. And that was Barbarian Alien by Ruby Dixon. This is the second book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. And I read the first book for a video about how I read my favorite author's favorite book. I think mostly I also got them because the covers are so pretty. Like if the covers weren't pretty, I don't think I would have been drawn to buy these books, but they're a fun time. This is mainly alien smut, and this is definitely not for everyone, but if you want something very different, very quick and easy, definitely the opposite of a slow burn, then you might as well try these. I don't expect these to be like the most profound romances ever. It's just a very fun time. I gave this 3 stars. Then my next 3 books I all read part of finishing off series that I'm in the middle of, and I have a reading vlog for it, so I won't talk too much about how I feel about them. But if you already saw my reading vlog, then you know it was a good one. And the first book that I read for that is Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is the second book in the Maples Hill series, the first one being Icebreaker. And I really enjoyed this one. So you follow the same friend group, but a different couple. In general, the Maples Hill series is centered about the hockey team, but in here you follow them around the summer. And Russ is a camp counselor this summer to earn a bit of money and not have to go back to his parents' house. And right before they go to camp, the friend group actually is having a party just, to kick off summer. And at that party, he meets this beautiful girl and has a one-night stand with her, thinking they would never see each other again. But turns out when he goes to camp, she's actually a camp counselor there as well. This was very fun. It was also nice to have like a different setting, and I first was a little bit worried of that because I love this friend group so much and was scared that I wouldn't get a lot of this friend group, but this has great found family. I love this book so much for that alone, and you got to see a lot of the friend group, but you also got introduced to new characters that added a lot of banter and just fun as well. This was such a good romance. I gave this 5 stars, and I think in particular what Hannah Grace is very good at is portraying relationships that are really healthy. Like you have open communication, and it's not that the characters are flawless or don't ever make a mistake, but just the way they handle things is just really, really great. And I think therefore, because it is so positive and healthy, that it almost lacks a little bit of tension. And for some people this might be boring because a lot of reviews that I saw said that they felt very mediocre about it, and that's why I wasn't too intrigued to pick this up. But I'm glad that my TBR jar actually chose this book. I didn't talk about this earlier in my stats, but I read 3 out of my 6 TBR books, which isn't an improvement, but it's also not worse than last month. But yeah, this was one of them. And then the other book that also my TBR jar picked was Defy Me. And oh my goodness, this book surprised me so much. It shouldn't have, because I really enjoyed the Shatter Me series. This is part of it. This is book 5, and I won't talk about like what happens in here too much because it would be a spoiler. In the Shatter Me series in general, you follow Juliet, who's been in an asylum because she has the ability to kill people when they touch her or she touches them. But someone from the new government gets her out to utilize her as a weapon, and she obviously doesn't want to be a weapon and tries to flee and get herself free. When I did my books recommendations for the Tortured Poets Department songs, I put Who's Afraid of Little Old Me for Juliet in the Shatter Me series. And when I did that, I was like, yeah, this is so fitting. But reading this just solidified that that song is made for Juliet. This was the easiest 5-star I could ever give a book, and it really put me back into my Shatter Me era. And also, when I started this book, I was super lost because I forgot a lot of the things that happened. So before I read this, I actually went and read the novella that is before here. I usually don't really rate novellas. It's like 100 pages and it just doesn't feel like enough for me to rate. It was a really good novella. It got me right back into the world. I loved it. So I not only read Defy Me, but also Shadow Me. And then in that reading vlog, I also read Heartless by Elsie Silver, which is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series. And oh my goodness, That book was so good. You follow Kate, who is the brother of Red, the first guy in Flawless in that series, and he's a single dad and very, very grumpy. And he's just a bit exhausted and needs help, and he doesn't really want to have anyone. But Summer, the girl from the first book, has an idea to bring her best friend in, Willa, to babysit Luke, Kate's little boy, and oh my goodness, Willa was just the best female main character ever. I loved her so much. She had so much fire, and she was the perfect sunshine to Kate's grumpy personality. They have like a 13-year age gap, and I never cared for age gap before. I also never really cared for single dad, but Elsie Silver proved me wrong with so many things. This book was just everything to me, and there was so much angst and tension in this book. It was just so incredible. I actually think that that book will be one of my favorites this year. And the only reason why I have it not with me right now is that I already lent it to one of my other friends because I wanted her to read it as well, and I love being the library for my friends. So after all these 5 stars, let's talk about one that definitely isn't a 5-star. And that's a book that I actually listened to, and that is Not the Man I Thought He Was by Phoebe McLeod. Honestly, I think this was just very bad storytelling. And I had to look up if it was actually meant to be a romance, because to me, there was nothing romantic about it. And you see the title, Not the Man I Thought He Was. So you're like, oh my god, what was his secret? What was he hiding? He was not hiding anything. And I can tell you what she thought he was, because it was right there in the beginning. And I can't believe that someone read that draft and was like, yeah, this is gonna be a good book. So the plot twist that we knew from the beginning is that she thought he was gay. We're starting the book with them landing in bed, and she's like, oh my god, what are you doing here? And then we go back like a year in the past, and from that moment on where she thought he was gay, and she still thought that in the first scene, so a whole year we're following their like friendship, but with everything they do, she thinks it's platonic because he's gay. So there's nothing romantic going on. And even when they have like a very weird scenes where they see each other actually naked, there's no heat, there is no chemistry, because she thinks he's gay. So, like, how do you want me to be convinced of their romance? The thing is, spend a very small amount of time where you show us where she thought that, and then when she sees, oh, he's actually not, on their romance. Don't do like 90% of the book where she still thinks he's gay. This whole plot device was just so weird, because how do you want me as a reader to be convinced that you're best friends when you don't even know that part of your best friend? They never talk about it, and they did talk about like relationships, and it's just weird how in a whole year does that never come up? And also how you just assume that about a person is just so weird. And after a whole year, when he then finally reveals his feelings for her, and she is shocked because she's like, oh, what? But I thought you were gay. He's obviously hurt. And I mean, like, how do you recover from that? Because his biggest fear was that he's only in the friendship zone and can't get out. But not only was he just in the friendship zone, he was not even in the same cycle of guys she could date because she thought he was gay. Like, how do you recover from that? It was really bizarre. I gave this book 2 stars. I think if I had read it, I maybe even have DNF'd it, but because I listened to it, it was alright. I would not recommend this book. Another bizarre book I read this month is What Lurks Between the Fates by Harper L. Woods, I think is the author. And this is the 3rd book in the Flesh and Bone series. I don't really know why I'm still reading this series. Like, this series just lacks so much tension. And honestly, just nothing happens. There will be a 4th book, and I hate that the author put a cliffhanger right at the end that I now want to read the 4th book, because I spent so much time with these characters. Like, now I just want to know what happens in the end. Really, I think this could be such a good series if those 4 books would have been 2 and you just cut out all that shit where nothing happens. In every single book of this series, like right at the beginning, they're saying something that they don't want to happen. Then this whole book, they're trying to avoid that this thing is going to happen. And then at the end, this happens. And that was the case in the 1st book. That was the freaking case in the 2nd book. And oh my goodness, this was the case in the 3rd book. And I just pray that the 4th book won't be the same. It just made everything in between so unnecessary, because you're like, yeah, it's the same outcome anyway. It's just prolonged. And that's how it feels. Like, very, very dragged out. I still gave the book 3 stars because I didn't hate it enough to quit. It's also quite steamy, and it has the Fated Maid trope. It kind of feels like fan fiction and not very elevated writing. That's not to say that there are not people out there who would definitely enjoy this. And as I said, I didn't completely hate it. I want this to end. I also started the book last month actually, and it just took me a while to read it because, as I said, it's just very prolonged and nothing really holds my attention there. So I parallel read this with other books, and sometimes that's just how I need to read a book. Another book that took me a while to finish is actually Daisy Hates the Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings. And this has nothing to do with this book being bad or anything. This is just a lot. Emotionally, I was just scared, honestly, to finish this book. And I actually started this book with my 2 book besties that I read this series with, and you probably saw that from my video where we did the girls trip and we all started the book together. And usually I read these books with my friend, like when we're together, so we're physically in the same room. And that's how I kind of need to read these, because I need to talk about what's happening in them. But I was away a lot and we just didn't have the time to meet to read, so we couldn't read it together, and it took me a while to pick it back up. But once I did, oh my god, I finished this so quickly. And there's just something in Jessa Hastings' writing that is so incredible. And there's so many frustrating things going on in here. And again, I can't really talk about what's happening in here because it would spoil a lot of things. Let me tell you guys one thing that I absolutely hate to read, one trope, and that is love triangle. So why do I love this book? Why? I don't get it. And I think also a lot of people reading this book always talk about Julian, and I love Julian, especially in the end, but can we also just talk about Daisy and Christian? I love them so much in here, and I'm actually so excited to see their next journey, and I can't believe the next book I'm gonna read is gonna be the final Magnolia Parks book, and I'm not ready for this. This universe is just something else. Like, it's definitely one of my favorite series, and I love these characters, even though they frustrate me. So because after this book, I felt a little bit lost, let's say that, where I was like, what do I even want to read next? Like, there's nothing else that brings so many emotions out of me, like the Magnolia Parks universe, where I thought, okay, I need something quick and easy. And I thought, you know what, why not read the next novella from the Shatter Me universe, which is Reveal Me, and it's also told in Kenji's POV again. It took my thoughts away from the drama going on in Daisy Hates' book and was just what I needed. And again, I'm not rating novellas, but this was really good. I'm very glad that I decided to read the novellas, and I'm definitely not gonna wait too long to read the final book in the series. So let's talk about the final book that I read in May, and also the book that kind of gave me a book slump, and that is Guilt by Geneva Lee. And I read this book because I heard it's kind of like Gossip Girl and Pretty Little Liars, and they're not lying. And it is on Kindle Unlimited, so I didn't want to get the cover unless I liked the book. And you see, I don't have the book with me because I did like this book. When I started the book, I am not kidding you, I had the 5-star feeling. And let me tell you quickly about the plot. So you have Emma and her best friend Josie who go to this party of like the most popular girl in their school, and they go to like a very prestigious school in Las Vegas, and they're actually not invited to the party, but Josie like wants to be in with the cool kids, and Emma actually like leaves and looks around the apartment and encounters this stranger, and they spend the night together, not like sexually, but they cook together, they go swimming, and just ignore the party basically. And the next morning when she wakes up in the apartment, she finds out that there's been a murderer. So at the police, she finds out that the man who was murdered is actually the dad to the girl she went to the party to, who's also the rival of her own dad, because they had history, and therefore there's already a lot going on between those families. But then they ask her about the stranger who she spent the night with, and she finds out he is the brother of the popular girl, and not only that, but he's also the suspect of murdering his own dad. And I mean, the premise of this sounds so good, but the writing was just so bad. I feel like if you would give this book to an editor, they could really do something with that, because as I said, like, there is hope for this, but also, why did these people needed to be underage? I just hated following these characters, and what they did being underage, it was a lot. The information we got in the end was just like something else. I don't even know how you think about that. You have like this mystery part, who murdered Nathaniel West, and then also the romance between Emma and Jamison West, and then there's also this person, the dealer, who is kind of like or you know how Gossip Girl would be, who like tries to expose them, and there's just a lot going on. And also the way the book ended was in such a depressing way that I feel like this book put me in a book slump. I gave this book a 1.5 star. This felt so much like Wattpad. I don't personally recommend it, but I think there are people out there who would like it. Just know that there are a lot of inappropriate stuff in this book and a lot of things that made me very uncomfortable. So do with that whatever you want. And with that, my May wrap up is done. So like this video and also subscribe for more bookish content, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!